In the wake of the second beta stream for Arknights Endfield, Hypogryph has given us much more information about how the state of the game currently is, and what we can expect from the tests such as a new region, improved graphics, new characters, improved combat, mobile port, and much more. But unfortunately, due to the nature of internet discourse, all this wonderful and exciting news are now relegated to the side for the real juicy information, that is the gacha system, and most importantly, the introduction of blueprint system for the base building. Many have voiced their opinions on the matter, with a substantial part of them being in support of such system, from Arknights veterans and newcomers alike, saying that it is a welcomed QOL feature. On the other hand, the opposing side of the argument voices their concern that such a system will negate player involvement with the base building and, in the worst possible case, forcing Hypogryph to guard and neuter the base building so they can appease the overwhelming majority. All of this is certainly an extension of the Dutch controversy from the months prior, which I have stated my opinion in this video. And to an extent, this video is also a continuation of said video. While many of them are concerned that the base building could be abolished in the future, one particular notion caught my interest the most, that being the new combat, blueprint system, and to a certain extent character design does not reflect the Arknights' identity and also have diluted it. As a massive fan of Arknights, this argument hits the closest to me, to the point where I can sympathize with a negatively vocal subset of the community. But in the spirit of keeping a more nuanced stance on the matter, I will personally explore the importance for why Endfield should continue the Arknights legacy and the equal need for Endfield to forge its own individuality. First, we have to talk about why Endfield have to follow and conform to the feel of the Arknights IP. For one, the name Arknights is right there in the title, signaling and communicating to players that they should expect the same elements and scope found in Arknights. The name carries the weight of 6 years worth of tone, depth, and world building that fans have come to love and associate with Hypogryph's most successful title. From a marketing standpoint, the use of the Arknights IP creates a sense of assurance for its share on the market by leveraging the already established fanbase to garner trust on the project early in its development, and ensures visibility in an already oversaturated market. The Arknights name also sets the expectations that Endfield will continue the spirit of Arknights' moral complexity, intricate world structure, and the distinctive blend of science fiction and social commentary that Arknights is known for. If Endfield strays too far from the established elements and rules of the IP, it risks undermining the trust and recognition it has built thus far, diluting the IP into being recognizable in name only, but hollow in spirit. Maintaining consistency with the IP sends a message that Endfield is genuinely carrying forward the thematic legacy of Arknights. By using the Arknights IP, Endfield has the responsibility to preserve what made the brand so unique in the first place. After all, if Endfield stray away significantly from Arknights' core tenets, why should it be called Arknights Endfield in the first place? And this statement is something that I wholeheartedly agree. Arknights is the only gacha game I enjoy at the moment, and I would like to see and experience more of what this IP is known for. However, I also think it is not right for me to put the Arknights IP on a pedestal and glorify it more than other gacha IPs. It is important for us as players to reflect on what made Arknights so good in the first place, and question whether that specific element we have in mind can be translated and carried over on a one-to-one scale into a different genre. By default, Endfield wouldn't have the same strategic depth as Arknights by virtue of it being a 3D game. We don't even have to dig into the combat system, whether it is the tag-task combat or the current one, to acknowledge there is a big difference between all three of them. In the same vein, I would like to express my displeasure over Last Right's design. Personally, I think her design does not reflect the design elements of Arknights characters, which are easier to carry over than specific game mechanics, proven by the existence of characters such as Ardelia and Pogranichnik. Sure, they are skins that invoke the same kind of goonerism and outliers such as Wishadel and Aurora, but they are no more than that. Moving forward, I would like to see her design as no more than an outlier, rather than a commonality. Moving on, we have to know Endfield's needs for its own individuality, because at its core, Endfield is a totally different game. Where Arknights pride itself on strategic tower defense gameplay with RTS and sandbox elements, Endfield is built around real-time action combat, exploration, and infrastructure development coupled with extensive material management. For Endfield to succeed in this new genre, it cannot simply copy-paste Arknights' design logic. Rather, it has to be given the creative freedom to change and mold established ideas to fit its own identity, and this would come in the form of trying to appeal to a wider audience. I understand where the frustration against these changes are coming from. More and more gacha games are released using Hoyoverse schemes, particularly Genshin Impact as the blueprint, unintended, for its design, leading to a stagnation in the market and more games feeling like the same game over and over again, or as I would call it, the Hoyogenization of gacha games. In the pursuit of capturing a glimpse of Genshin's success, these games have inadvertently made the same mistake that Hoyoverse has done. For example, porting over the same gacha system that is now regarded as very predatory. One could say that there is enough difference between all these games, but this difference is only present in the finer details of each of them. The nitty-gritty information about each game systems can only be known once you commit to a deeper understanding about all of them, not just a surface-level research into each one of them. In fact, I will argue that the bitterness and toxicity throughout all these Hoyogenized games stems from the finer details of their mechanics. Because all these gacha games are built on the same building block, there is a strong pressure to cling onto finer and finer differences between each games in the hope of alienating themselves from the negative connotation others might have garnered. Ironically, this mentality of us versus them only infects them with the same negative connotation, as can be seen with the vocal subset of Wuthering Waves. This can be further exaggerated by content creators who fuels this rivalry for the sake of engagement and relevancy, seemingly having no interest to consolidate any of the disputes that might have taken place. This is one of the major concerns for the subset that is against Endfield having a more rotation-based combat instead of the strategic Xenoblade as combat in the tech test. That the move towards these changes will eventually lead Endfield into becoming Hoyogenized. In defense of Endfield, however, I believe that the game needs to take this leap of faith to carve its own space in the market. A more tactile feel of world interaction, crafting systems, and combat beyond the capability of the original game are a much needed change for its genre. Endfield cannot simply be a 3D version of Arknights, because if it sticks too closely to the established formula, it risks suffocating its own innovation, unable to carve its own creative identity. For Endfield to thrive, it must reinterpret the Arknight spirit, not replicating it. The goal shouldn't be to mimic Arknight's success, but to expand its universe in new ways that justify its existence as an extension to the Arknight's IP. Now you are probably wondering what is my opinion on the blueprint system and how my stance on it is going to fit into the narrative of this video. In truth, I see the blueprint system as a fair trade-off for people who doesn't want to meaningfully engage in its intricate systems, provided the intricacies of the factory is still maintained and even be expanded upon in the future. The blueprint system, especially the ability to share an entire factories, can be seen as an accessibility feature added for those who are not interested in it in the first place. However, the factory cannot simply be disregarded entirely, as it is one of the core features of Endfield, and more importantly, heavily communicated and advertised as one. As such, the factory is a substantial part of Enfield's individuality, wholly unique to itself, neither tied to Arknights nor present in other gacha games. It is equally imperative to make players understand the importance of understanding the fundamentals of the factory before giving them the option to trivialize their experience with the system, which I think is the point of having preset blueprints locked behind tutorials. However, I do think only locking them behind tutorials are still too lenient, and much more must be done so that a fair chance is given to the factory system, whether it is by locking certain blueprint sizes under advanced regional development, advanced factories requiring specific tiers of materials that can only be manufactured by the factory, or in the worst case possible, copying a shared blueprint requires a unique consumable that are only available in the late game. All these options, in my opinion, gives ample time for players to grow and be invested into the factory system, and if certain players still does not give a damn about factory, they are free to copy other players' factories. A fair comparison to be made here is the Arknights operator Rishadel, arguably the strongest character in the game, with her existence fundamentally serves the same purpose as an accessibility feature, because she can trivialize most stage mechanics in the game. However, players must still engage in Arknights' core mechanics, such as operator roles, event mechanics, and character progression to be able to borrow a friend's Wishadel and use her skill tree. The skill that is so strong it trivializes the game mechanics. In a sense, Wishadel's skill tree is the Arknights equivalent to the shareable blueprints. In both scenarios, game mechanics from respective games are given the chance to hook in and present its appeal to the players before the players make the decision whether they give enough of a fuck to engage with these systems. With this in mind, the notion that shareable blueprint dilutes the Arknights IP is entirely false. Instead, its inclusion does the opposite, strengthening the notion that Arknights provide a wealth of options to the players to play whatever game modes they like, whichever characters they like, and in however ways that they like. Of course, this is entirely speculatory. All of us simply do not have enough information regarding these systems to make an all-encompassing, perfect statement regarding all these discussion points. What we do have, however, is the responsibility to engage in these discussions on a sound mind and reject the negative nature of internet discourse. Civility must be upheld no matter what side of the argument you are currently standing on. Lastly, I want to answer the question, is Endfield a worthy successor for the Arknights identity? For me, the answer would be yes. From the information given to us thus far and my pre-established trust towards Hypogryph from my years worth of experience with the Arknights, Endfield, as far as we know, seems to carry over the unique identity of Arknights quite well, albeit in its own unique way. As I have said in my video regarding the dodge, change is not a bad thing. It is not a negative thing to make Endfield more accessible to a wider audience, provided Hypogryph does not take away from the game's identity, which Hypogryph has proven to be mindful of. Time and time again, Hypogryph has proven themselves to actually be innovative and isn't scared to improve in response to the negative reactions and shortcomings of the many game modes they have released over the years. For example, Hypogryph are still willing to update integrated strategies too, to be more in line with the modern iterations of this highly beloved roguelike mode. Not only that, even with the divisive reception towards pinch-out operation, Hypogryph were still adamant in using it as the basis for the next iteration of Arknights' most recognizable game mode, contingency contracts. This is the seed that has planted my trust in Hypogryph that they will not abandon one of the core tenets of Endfield simply because the engagement with said content could be subpar at best. Additionally, a change in the genre does not mean the total abandonment of pre-established style and sense of experience from a previous title. An example for this is Helldivers 2. Its shift from a top-down shooter to a third-person shooter, thus making it more appealing to a wider audience, is exactly the reason why the franchise has seen its success. There were even changes towards the design of the game's aesthetics and monetization, but in spite of all that, Arrowhead still managed to carry over its combination and call-in mechanic and its satirical narrative towards the military-industrial complex quite well. But to give credit where it's due, Hypogryph, in my opinion, is tackling a significantly bigger hurdle than Arrowhead Studios because the jump between a tower defense and an action RPG is much bigger. It is a complete redefinition of how players experience the world, combat engagement, and even towards character interaction. It is a far more ambitious venture to pull off, but I believe that Hypogryph are capable of doing it because this company have proven time and time again to be able to push the boundary of what they are capable of achieving. At the end of the day, I think it is safe to say that Endfield is in good hands. Hypogryph has proven that they are perfectly capable on balancing the vision of their games and player expectations. But it is also true that players have to remind themselves that companies rarely have our best interest in mind. We have the responsibility to curb our expectations and let Endfield speak for itself when it is released, whether it will retain the identity it dares to tie itself to or unshackling itself from the constraints of the IP or disregarding all that it has built thus far to cater to the most common denominator. If Endfield truly succeeds in the current state it is presented, it will show us that this IP does not have to remain static to stay true to its original vision and scope. Legacy and innovation can coexist with each other and strengthen their weaknesses, because a legacy doesn't survive by being at a standstill. It survives by forcing itself to change while still be reminded of where it was before. Whether Endfield becomes a faithful continuation of the Arknights identity or into something entirely different, one thing is for certain, that Endfield marks a bold new chapter for the Arknights universe and one that is worth being excited about. And with that, thank you for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Max out your super, and this has been Skybird signing off.